What if the thing you're chasing your whole life doesn't have a name? What if you can feel it, recognize it instantly, argue about it for hours, and yet the moment you try to define it, it slips through your fingers like smoke? That's the question a man asks himself while riding a motorcycle across the American Northwest with his 11-year-old son on the back seat. On the surface, this is a book about fixing motorcycles. Underneath, it's a story about a man hunting down a ghost, a former version of himself who was destroyed by his own mind for asking one impossible question. What is quality? By the end, you won't look at a wrench, a stuck bolt, or your own thinking the same way again. This is Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig. The narrator, we'll just call him the narrator for now, because that matters later, is riding from Minnesota toward Montana and eventually the Pacific coast with his son Chris, alongside friends John and Sylvia Sutherland. It's a real cross-country motorcycle trip, and Pirsig uses it as the frame for the entire book. As the miles pass, he delivers what he calls a chautauqua, an old-fashioned traveling lecture, thinking out loud about ideas he spent years developing, one small piece at a time, between gas stops and campsites. The first big idea shows up almost immediately through John. John owns an expensive BMW motorcycle and refuses to even look at its inner workings. When it breaks, he takes it to a shop rather than open the case himself. The narrator, by contrast, does all his own maintenance, adjusting the chain, gapping the spark plugs, diagnosing problems with tools he carries strapped to the bike. This isn't just a difference in mechanical skill. It's a difference in how two people relate to the world, and Pirsig spends the whole first stretch of the book unpacking why that difference matters so much. Pirsig names these two approaches the romantic and the classical. The romantic mode sees things in terms of immediate appearance, how something looks, feels, and inspires. It's intuitive, spontaneous, artistic. John's love of his motorcycle is romantic. He cares about the way it feels to ride, the freedom of it, not the machinery underneath. He'd rather not know, because knowing might spoil the magic. The classical mode sees things in terms of underlying form, the parts, the systems, the reasons why something works. It's analytical, systematic, technical. The narrator's approach to motorcycle repair is classical. He wants to understand the engine as a rational structure of interlocking causes, and he finds real satisfaction in that understanding. Pirsig's point is that modern life has split these two ways of seeing into enemies. People who love technology get mocked as soulless and joyless. People who love beauty and feeling get dismissed as impractical dreamers who can't fix their own toaster. Somewhere, Pirsig argues, there used to be and still could be a unity underneath both modes, a single quality that both the engineer and the artist are actually reaching for, even if they use different words for it. That unity is what he spends the rest of the book trying to name. He finds his word early: quality. Not quality in the sense of a five-star hotel or a luxury car, but quality with a capital Q. The thing you recognize the instant you see it, in a poem, in a well-tuned engine, in a good piece of craftsmanship before you can explain why it's good. A skilled mechanic has it. A great teacher has it. An honest sentence has it. You don't need a professor to point it out to you. You already know it when you meet it. Here's the twist that drives the whole book. The narrator becomes obsessed with the idea that quality cannot be defined. Every time he tries to pin it down, is it objective, something sitting inside the object itself, measurable and provable? Is it subjective, something that exists only inside the observer's mind, a matter of taste? The definition collapses under its own weight. And yet, he insists, put a room full of people in front of two motorcycles, two paintings, two pieces of writing, and they will almost always agree on which one has more quality, long before anyone can explain the reasoning. That paradox becomes an intellectual trapdoor, one he fell through once before as a completely different person. Because here's the reveal that reframes everything you've read so far. The narrator used to be someone else. Literally. Years before this motorcycle trip, he was a brilliant, restless philosophy and rhetoric teacher named Phaedrus. Pirsig borrows the name from one of Plato's dialogues. Fedrris taught composition at a university in Montana, and he grew disgusted with how student writing was graded, by rigid, arbitrary rules about grammar and structure that had almost nothing to do with whether the writing was actually good. So Fedrris ran an experiment. He stopped grading by the rulebook and instead asked students simply to write something with quality, then debated openly, essay by essay, what made one piece better than another. It worked. Students improved dramatically once freed from formula, forced instead to trust their own sense of what was good. But that small classroom experiment also planted the obsession that would eventually consume him entirely. If quality is real enough to teach by, real enough that a room full of strangers can agree on it instantly, then what exactly is it made of? Phaedrus couldn't let the question go. He left teaching and enrolled at the University of Chicago to study philosophy formally, hoping the greatest minds in Western thought could finally tell him what quality was. Instead, he ran headfirst into what Pirsig calls the Church of Reason, the entire tradition of Western logic stretching back to Aristotle, a tradition that insists everything real must be sorted into fixed categories, defined by fixed rules, and proven by fixed methods. Phaedrus became convinced this rigid, categorizing, subject versus object way of thinking, the same rational machinery running from Aristotle straight through modern science and modern education, was fundamentally broken. It couldn't account for quality at all, because quality comes before categories. It's the very thing that makes us choose one category over another in the first place. His professors saw a brilliant student turning heretic, attacking the foundations of the discipline. Phaedrus saw an entire civilization's operating system built on a 2,000-year-old mistake. The narrator describes this less like an academic disagreement and more like an actual war. Phaedrus, alone, against the whole edifice of rational Western philosophy. That war cost him everything. Phaedrus pushed the question of quality so hard, for so many sleepless nights, staring at it from every angle, that his mind gave way completely. He suffered a total psychological breakdown. He was hospitalized and diagnosed, in the clinical language of the era, with a severe mental illness. The treatment that followed was electroconvulsive therapy, repeated, deliberate jolts of electric shock intended to erase the disturbed patterns of thought running through his brain. It worked in the crudest possible sense. Phaedrus, as a personality, was gone. The man who woke up afterward had no memory of who Phaedrus had been or what he had discovered about quality, Aristotle, or anything else. That man is the narrator of this book. The motorcycle trip we've been riding along on isn't just a summer vacation. It's an unconscious pilgrimage back toward the site of his own erased self, with fragments of Phaedrus's forgotten ideas resurfacing throughout the narration like a ghost knocking from the inside. And his son Chris, riding behind him for hundreds of miles, is quietly terrified that whatever broke his father before might be breaking again right now. Alongside this psychological mystery, Pirsig keeps returning to very practical, hands-on wisdom about motorcycle maintenance, and it's some of the most quoted material in the book. He introduces the idea of stuckness, the frustrating moment when you're elbow deep in an engine, a stripped screw won't budge, and nothing makes sense anymore, a feeling every mechanic and honestly every human being knows well. Rather than treating stuckness as failure, Pirsig reframes it as the doorway to real understanding. The exact point where genuine curiosity has to take over from frustration and ego. He also catalogs what he calls gumption traps, all the small things that quietly drain your motivation and care while you're working on a machine. Hurrying because you're impatient, ego getting bruised by a problem you can't solve, boredom, anxiety, a foul mood, wanting to look competent instead of actually wanting to do good work, or value rigidity, where you're so locked into one way of seeing a problem that an obvious fix stays invisible. The antidote, he insists, isn't a better toolkit or a repair manual. It's peace of mind. A calm, attentive mind produces good mechanical work the same way it produces good writing, good relationships, or a good life. Caring about the machine and caring about the task in front of you is itself an act of quality. As the trip and the Chautauqua both build toward their climax, the fragments of Phaedrus's old philosophy start reassembling into something Pirsig calls the metaphysics of quality. The core claim: quality isn't a property of objects, and it isn't a property of minds. It's the fundamental event that happens before the split between subject and object even occurs. The raw moment of experience out of which both the thing perceived and the person perceiving it get carved afterward, almost as an afterthought. In Phaedrus's model, quality comes first, Static, dead categories like matter and mind, science and art, technology and spirit are just useful conveniences we invent after the fact to organize what we've already felt. This sounds abstract, but Pirsig ties it directly back to the motorcycle sitting between his legs on the highway. A machine isn't just cold metal opposed to a warm human soul. The distinction between mechanical and spiritual is exactly the false split Fedrris is trying to dissolve. Caring for a machine well, understanding it deeply, patiently, attentively, isn't the opposite of a spiritual life. It can be one expression of it. The philosophical climax and the emotional climax converge near the end of the trip, symbolically staged around a mountain that the narrator, tellingly, chooses not to summit, while Phaedrus, in a buried memory, once climbed it. As the narrator's grip on his usual composure slips, the ghost of Phaedrus becomes harder and harder to hold at bay, and the book's tension peaks. Is the narrator's identity about to fracture again, the exact way Phaedrus's did? What resolves it isn't a philosophical proof. It's Chris. Throughout the whole trip, Chris has been anxious, moody, and increasingly desperate for his father's attention, complaining of stomachaches that seem to come from nowhere, because on some buried level he remembers a warmth from before the breakdown that the narrator, ever since the shock therapy, has never fully been able to give back. In the book's final, devastating scene, the narrator finally lets Phaedrus back in, not as a threat to be medicated away or suppressed, but as a part of himself to be reintegrated, accepted, forgiven. He looks at his son and, for the first time in the entire book, really sees him, present and whole. The last images of the story aren't a tidy philosophical conclusion. They're a father and son, reunited, riding on together. So what do you actually take from Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance? Not a tidy dictionary definition of quality. Pirsig never gives you one, and that's precisely the point. What you take instead is a way of paying attention. The book argues that the split we assume exists between the technical and the emotional, the rational and the spiritual, the mechanic and the artist, the classical and the romantic, is a trap we build ourselves out of habit, and we can unbuild it one small act of care at a time. Tightening a bolt properly instead of forcing it. Writing an honest sentence instead of a clever one. Really looking at your kid instead of just riding beside him. Pirsig himself survived a real breakdown, a real hospitalization, and years of obsessive thought chasing an idea he could never fully pin down on paper. Maybe that's exactly why this book still resonates more than 50 years after it was published. The things worth caring about most in life are usually, stubbornly, the ones that refuse to be defined. If this summary made you want to ride along with the full book yourself, it's absolutely worth the trip, dense in places, but genuinely rewarding. And if you want more deep dives like this one, subscribe because there's a lot more road ahead.